Slip space rupture detected.
Gamma station control, reading multiple pings below the orbital defense
Slip
grid.
space rupture detected.
Yeah, we're picking up anomalies too. Are you reading
Slip
it?
space rupture
Multiple
detected.
Covenant signatures.
Slip space
Does anyone
rupture
have a
detected.
They're everywhere.
Slip space rupture detected.
The whole damn Covenant
Slip
fleet.
space rupture detected.
G'day! Good to see you survived the first contact with Paramount's Halo Season 2. Despite having almost 2 years to prepare the sheltered harbour for this exact eventuality, I don't think we were nearly as ready as we should have been. And as the sheltered harbour's leader, I take full ownership for that fact. Like a fool, I gave into the most dangerous thing for a Halo fan: hope. I did my best to put aside the trauma of Season 1 to look at Season 2 with open and unbiased eyes. And prior to the show's premiere, I liked what I was seeing. A new showrunner who seemed to appreciate the gravitas of Halo.
Takes place on a huge theater of war, which is kind of how you have to tell the story if you're going to kind of retain the spirit of the game.
An almost apologetic executive producer, talking in terms of a time jump and soft reboot.
Yeah, the biggest learning from Season 1 is how to make the show, which I think let us go into Season 2 really focused on how do we make sure our writing around characters surfaces and really leads the story forward.
Really?
And a somewhat humbled Pablo Schreiber, who evidently had been given very clear talking points this time around.
There are a number of really, really wonderful moments from the lore that get touched on in their own unique ways in this season, and I think a lot of fans will be quite excited to see these things be touched upon.
I personally wish he'd stop inappropriately touching Halo's lore, but that's just me. The meta around the show's lead up and advertising seemed pretty clear to someone who has a tendency to overthink in 4D galaxy brain. Remember Season 1 and rise from its fall, i.e., we acknowledge that we botched it and we're going to get it right this time. Of course, this is 100% a direct reference to the fall of Reach and Remember Reach, which fans were screaming for after Season 1 totally missed the mark. So even superficially, there was enough positive change to warrant at least my mild curiosity. To say that I was excited for the series would be disingenuous, as I'd spent a long time mentally preparing myself for another absolute dumpster fire. But after watching the trailers and several interviews, my stance softened. What if they could do the unthinkable? What if Season 2 could redeem Season 1? What if it was actually good?
Suck big ass cream.
What the hell was that, you little freckle-faced cartoon?
Kill-death ratio? Come on, man, you don't play Spartan Attack?
I don't keep score.
Is Vanek still writing your material?
Boy, I'm about to wear you like a sock.
I think there might be something wrong with me.
Yeah, Season 2 is worse than I'd hoped, and yet somehow better than I'd feared. So put your goddamn helmet on and keep low while we get into this. I'm still on Paramount's high-value target list from Season 1, and I don't want your death on my conscience because you got deleted by a copyright strike sniper. Johnson, take point. The jellyfish is gonna jump in this tank.
Roll across the bridge and blow up any inhuman son of a bitch.
Dumb enough to attempt to copyright strike his channel.
Pull yourself together, because you're going with him.
Troopers, we are green and very, very mean!
I'm going to focus on the positives first because I believe it would be very hypocritical of me not to acknowledge when passion is clearly present in a project. The opening of Season 2 feels like a massive apology for some of the more contentious elements of Season 1, and a number of my key criticisms from the first season are addressed in the first 2 episodes alone, proving just how easy it would have been to remedy them in Season 1, but whatever. The frustrating part of this, though, is it feels very much like the Star Wars sequel trilogy. 2 very different creative directors/storytellers with opposing opinions on the story's creative direction, playing a creative tug-of-war with the franchise. This creates a very bipolar experience for the viewer when creative visions clash like this. But regardless, Wiener's vision, oh dear, that's a very unfortunate name, is darker, grittier, and feels more like Halo than Kane's. Not that that benchmark was particularly high. So tonally, it gets a tick from me. The story picks up with Silver Team on the planet Sanctuary approximately 6 months after the events of Season 1. Not that the show actively states this, I had to infer it from interviews that I'd seen.
Yeah, I think we're about 6 months after the events of Season 1.
You think?
In the midst of Operation Shepherd.
Shepherd, shepherd, shepherd.
Rex? Grunt?
Shepard. Shepard.
Fear not, I'll explain this seemingly random Mass Effect reference later. The showrunner has also opted to remove the emotional suppressive palettes from all Silver Team members. Not that it really matters, as it seems that nothing changes whether a Spartan has them installed or not. Regardless, I feel this is a good choice, because they didn't add a whole lot to the story of Season 1, and now means that Silver Team and the Spartans thereof can engage in banter without some weird storytelling obstacle to prevent it.
I watch programs sometimes.
Programs?
Like, about animals and stuff.
Oh.
Don't do that.
On that note, the writing of Chief is infinitely better this time round. He's mission focused, sharp and to the point, and keeps his helmet on while in an active war zone. Again, this is such a low bar to clear from Season 1, but credit where credit is due, this is a massive improvement. Speaking of improvements, the Covenant are here, for real this time. And unlike their introduction in Season 1, they are treated with the storytelling reverence that they actually deserve. They are scary, competent, and even get the best of Long John Silver timeline. Or do they? We'll touch on this later. Actually, I can't be bothered talking about it later. There is a very real chance that Long John Silver timeline has PTSD from Season 1 and is exaggerating this encounter in his mind or imagining it altogether. Without a way to confirm this causes friction between the chain of command, specific Marines, and even his fellow Spartans. There. Done. A little bit more intriguing than him experiencing the City of Reach on the planet of Reach for the first time.
It's starting to even look like a triple rainbow. Oh my god!
Not only is the Covenant's depiction, at least as far as the Sangheili go, competently shot and animated, depicting them as the threat that they actually are, the show also addresses the massive world-building issue from Season 1, and actually attempts to define the current state of the galaxy and the war raging within.
While you were deployed, we lost Madrigal. We lost Estuary. And FleetCom predicts that the Covenant will glass Fumarole next.
You mean to tell me Madrigal was glassed because the Covenant are at war with the humans and knew where the planet was?
So these are the aliens. Ugly bastards.
Imagine my shock. This is such a small storytelling moment in terms of time taken to deliver, but the return of investment in terms of world building is huge. We now have a sense of the stakes of the story that were completely absent in Season 1. This war is costing human lives, and this is even demonstrated with a Covenant glassing, showing the evacuating civilians of the planet Sanctuary being killed. Again, imagine my shock when a visual medium actually shows the audience rather than telling them.
I spent my time trying to understand the aliens that attacked your outpost. Yours isn't the first planet to face the Covenant, and unfortunately, it won't be the last.
While I still have problems with the portrayal of the Covenant in terms of lore accuracy that I'll raise later, the attitude of the showrunner towards them in Season 2 is definitely coming from the right place, embracing them as the series' antagonist rather than ignoring them. Time will tell whether the execution can measure up to these good intentions, but it's a bloody good start. The action and cinematography are drastically improved from Season 1, with real focus from Wiener to be in the fight with the soldiers.
The fighting and the action sequences feel like you're more a part of them, you're in the action a lot more.
You mean like a video game?
Television show is a very, very different medium, and what works for video games is very different than what works for TV.
Ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
And it's amazing how much closer to Halo the action feels as a result of this small change. Gone are the ridiculous wide shots in high colour that betray all of the poor animation, replaced by a sense of claustrophobia and actual intrigue. It's clear to this jellyfish that at least now the showrunner is attempting to try and sell Halo as advertised, rather than just wearing its iconography as an uncanny meat skin, while it tells a completely unrelated story. On the note of iconography, they've reworked the main title theme, and it now very much sounds like Halo. I personally had no issues with the old theme, in fact it was one of the few elements of Season 1 that I didn't mind, but now, I don't know, it feels wrong to hear the iconic Halo music associated with the Silver Timeline. I guess that's a personal bias thing for me because Marty and Sal's music was such an important part of my childhood, and despite that bias, has a timeless class that will continue long after Paramount's show is forgotten. So I personally don't think the show deserves Marty and Sal's music, but I imagine some will very much appreciate the change. Another welcome change is the introduction of Colonel Ackerson, and while his character is vastly different from that in the books, and I'd be lying if I said I was excited to see him, he too has addressed several of the issues I had from Season 1. The tolerance for Long John Silver Timeline's insubordination to the chain of command? Gone. Admiral Parangoski's absolutely incompetent leadership? Gone. This moron acting in the background of Season 1, which cost $10 million per episode? Gone. Again, it is such a small change from Season 1. But seeing a competent leader addressing the failings of others and adhering to and enforcing the military chain of command, because make no mistake, Halo is a military sci-fi at its core, is a massive improvement that goes a long way to painting the UNSC as a force of competence, rather than the bungling morons led by brainless or absent idiots that they were in Season 1. This is the definition of good writing. Don't just tell me a character is X, Y, or Z. Bloody show me. It took about 5 minutes for Ackerson to become my favourite character. Sorry Kate, but you should have returned my calls. And not because I liked him in the books, but because he is written like an actual smart and competent leader, who I 100% believe could be in the top job. Across the board, Season 2 is a massive improvement from Season 1, and despite that bar being very, very low, I would actually say that if it maintains its current standard, as a season of sci-fi, it might actually stand on its own. Unlike Season 1, which was completely garbage across the board, even when divorced from Halo. The irony is not lost on me, because I remember every conversation around Season 1 and the recurring theme of, if you just forget that it's Halo, it's a good show by itself. Wrong, and Season 2 is the proof. This show has barely met the bare minimum standard, and it is so much better than Season 1 it's not funny. Don't get me wrong, the lore problems are ever present, but Season 2 hasn't yet actively offended me the way Season 1 did. Whether that's because the standard has improved or I was actually prepared for the incoming carnage remains unclear. But I'm sure you didn't fight through Paramount's invasion of your favourite sci-fi franchise to hear a jellyfish compliment Season 2 like there's a pistol being pointed at his head. You're here because there are still problems with the show. So let's talk about them. I'm going to do my best to keep the criticisms in-house to the Silver Timeline rather than comparing the show to the core timeline, because the crimes against the Halo canon will never be forgiven, and a gentle reminder that this show stands in the place of what should have been the live-action Halo movie. What could have been. But there are still plenty of cross-Silver Core timeline lore issues that are worthy of discussion, including the portrayal of the Covenant, the Spartans, and the UNSC. But before we get to those, let's talk Silver Timeline. I think it's admirable that Season 2 didn't just cut ties with Season 1 completely.
Admirable, but mistaken.
I am 98% sure that if Paramount announced that they were scrapping the Silver Timeline and starting over, they would have been embraced by a thankful fandom, at least in the short term, and there would have been actual excitement for Season 2. I joked that I would have been completely fine with Season 2 opening with John coming out of cryosleep, only to tell Cortana that he'd had a terrible dream. But instead, Season 2 opens with Long John's Silver Timeline on an operating table, as faceless surgeons attempt to remove Cortana from his brain, with a single tear rolling down his cheek. Thematically, and in terms of the lore of my channel, I couldn't think of a more appropriate opening for Season 2 of the Silver Timeline, because it still makes me want to cry too. Before I commence my well-established nitpicking of the ever-present, albeit less significant cosmetic problems of the Silver Timeline, I'd like to address a glaring carryover problem from Season 1. The Silver Timeline is still struggling to establish Halo's style, its essence, its DNA, the thing that sets it apart from other generic science fiction. To be fair, this is a problem that many modern-day sci-fi adaptations struggle with. Seemingly all modern-day sci-fi looks a little bit the same, and in Halo's case, a little bit like Blade Runner, right down to the holographic girlfriend experience. Halo is more than its props and costumes, which have been more missed than hit with the Silver Timeline anyway. You know, I better talk about this now or it'll get lost amongst some of the more important points I'm trying to make. How hard is it to actually size up costumes costumes to actors, then screen test them to make sure they don't look like a poorly fitted cosplay come filming time. This was an issue in Season 1 and it's still present now, and unfortunately it's most notable with the UNSC, whom, as military members, should have their dress and bearing squared away. It's a little thing, sure, but poorly fitting helmets, non-tailored or poorly fitting uniforms make the whole aesthetic of the UNSC look B-grade, cheap and lazy. Well, actually, military gear is provided by the lowest bidder, so you know bloody well what I'm getting at, pseudo-intellectual tuner. Aliens, Starship Troopers, Star Wars, at least Legacy era Star Wars, did not have high-ranking members walking around in clothes that were clearly the wrong size, or soldiers with poorly fitted and comically oversized helmets. The UNSC is not a third world modern-day military that is grossly underfunded. They got this right all the way back in 2007, with the 15th of the budget on Neil Blomkamp's Halo 3 Landfall, so there's absolutely no excuse for this. If you're failing to meet the cosmetic benchmark of Deliver Hope, We Are ODST and Landfall, then you probably should be asking yourself if you're the right person for the job. I bring this up because, funnily enough, the style and designs of the UNSC, not just their clothes but the overall production design, when contrasted against the art style of the Covenant, is a big part of Halo's DNA and identity. So when it's missing or replaced with genericisms, the very vibe of the thing is wrong. And in the opinion of this jellyfish, this is one of the key reasons why so many fans took issue with Halo 4 and Halo 5. Because the art style was off, the designs were off, the timelines were off. But that is a story for another time. As for the Halo series, they had a real chance to get this right and set a new baseline both in terms of the Bungie 343 design divide or, at the bare minimum, establish a new and unique art style that would unite old and new fans. Instead, we got the lazy approach. Neon lights and tight green leather pants. I'm gonna give the leather pants a pass. Damn it, Showtime. Season 2 has also elected to carry the story baggage of Season 1. And yes, that includes Quan, awkward teenage banter from what should be military professionals,
I heard they brought home a bunch of empty coffins.
Yeah, put you in one, bitch.
the Rebel space pirates, and somehow, McKee.
You're supposed to be dead!
I shot her myself.
I know that.
However, unlike Season 1, which charged ahead with the plot prior to world building and character development, Season 2 has already taken the time to flesh out its characters, both the old and the new. That said, these subplots have been to the show's detriment in this jellyfish's opinion. Season 2 approaches something reminiscent of Halo when Silver Team are suited up, either on ops or conducting training. And I don't want to downplay how much of an improvement this is from Season 1. But when they're not, the lack of Halo's distinct DNA means scenes look like they've come straight out of Mass Effect, or Blade Runner, or The Expanse. So in terms of the aesthetic, Halo Season 2 carries a lot of the problems of Season 1. It just doesn't look or feel like Halo, despite the many improvements. And this is because the show is too busy focusing on side plots about differently abled Spartans and diversity in space at the cost of the core narrative. While I'm glad the show has pivoted its focus to actually be more personable with its characters, rather than just forcing us to accept that the case is the case, as they did in Season 1, the varying and growing subplots distract from what should be the main plot point, the war with the Covenant. That said, we're only 2 episodes in, and already the Covenant have played a larger role in this season than they did in the entire first season, and we know that the show is building to the fall of Reach, so I guess we'll just have to wait and see. But in this jellyfish's opinion, the sooner the show drops these additional subplots and side characters, the better. Because this lack of focus on Halo's core elements is what killed Season 1, and if given the chance, it will slowly strangle Season 2 also. Speaking of the Covenant, while their depiction in the show is a massive improvement from the first season, with some scenes approaching what I'd actually describe as neat, despite how bizarre it would be to find a squad of soldiers without a flashlight, or a flare, or a glow stick, or a personal electronic device featuring a torch, the showrunner and writers seem to have this fascination with the concept that the Sangheili would only ever use energy swords and horde tactics. And while the Covenant absolutely do employ horde tactics, this traditionally is a responsibility of the Ungoi, hence the human slang, grunts. Sangheili are not traditionally frontline cannon fodder, they are commanders and leaders, and unless they're zealots, spec ops, or in a ceremonial position, they'd be wielding a plasma rifle in the first instance. They also have more important things to do than play active camo peekaboo with UNSC soldiers. Yes, it looks cool, but we all know how the working jellyfish feels about flash without substance. As I said, the Covenant's portrayal in the first 2 episodes is a massive improvement, but there is a long way to go before I'd consider calling them lore accurate in the Silver timeline. I suppose I can't talk about the lore problems with the elites and not do the same for the Spartans, but I'll keep it short. The group dynamics of the Spartans in the Silver timeline are weird. Season 2 introduces us to a new team, Cobalt, and evidently there's meant to be some friendly inter-team rivalry here. But the dialogue is at best forced and at worst very, very cringe.
I asked nicely. Do you think they'll let me shoot those guys?
Like, the casual references to them dying doesn't come across as a joke. It seems very genuine, which would be totally out of place in the core timeline. The Spartan 2s are meant to be tight, like brothers and sisters in arms. Through their shared augmentation process, their losses, their battles and history, they would be united and bonded in a way that would be almost indescribable to those outside of special operations or war veterans. But it doesn't come across in the show. What does come across though is teenage locker room banter, almost like the writers have never served in any branch of the military. Also, in Season 1, removing the pellet was a big deal. But now it's okay and we can all joke about it.
Stop picking on Silver. They have feelings now.
Wouldn't this make the other Spartans wary of Silver Team based on what we've seen?
I can't clear you for combat, Kai.
Why?
You're distracted.
I'm awake.
You're a danger to yourself and to others.
I honestly don't know why the showrunner wouldn't just write off the devices in all the Spartans, citing Halsey as a war criminal or something after she ordered 66th Silver Team in the last season. But I guess if these writing inconsistencies totally evaporated in Season 2, I would be questioning where they went, given that they were a fundamental piece of the first season. My cosmetic nitpicks are fairly minor outside of the show's focus on side characters and subplots that feel like they don't belong in Halo, as there's been a concerted effort across the board to improve the action, direction and storytelling. Wiener, I see you, I appreciate you. What?
That sounded dirty.
That said, things like rain, ambience, and a CGI overlay being present without any water physically hitting the Spartan's armor, and no, I won't accept Spartan's shields as a reason for this, to a Spartan in half a ton of Mjolnir armor floating down a river, and no, just because Spartans float in Halo 3 multiplayer does not excuse it here either, really take me out of the show pretty quickly. But I'll settle for the show fixing the DNA and storytelling issues first, because without a solid foundation, the rest will fall apart anyway. Overall, Season 2 is a massive improvement from Season 1, but a drunken monkey could have achieved this after playing one round of ODST Firefight. I appreciate that this time around, despite the baggage being carried from the first season, Wiener has made a conscious effort to make the show at least remotely feel like Halo, rather than hola from Wish, including taking on the very daunting task of adapting the Fall of Reach for the Silver timeline. But having worked on The Walking Dead previously, he is evidently sticking to his horror root strengths, which has worked well in the first 2 episodes. But will that style work later when the show needs 2 massive armies of the Covenant and UNSC to collide in both ground and space battles? Who knows, but I have a right side more hope with Wiener than I did with Kane, that's for damn sure. But I'll settle for the small improvements as Season 2 builds the foundation that was lacking in Season 1, because without it, this series will fall apart very quickly. I appreciate that I've sounded a little bit like a Silver Timeline defender in this video, but I want to encourage positive change, no matter how slight, whenever I see it in Hollywood. Make no mistake, the Silver Timeline is not the faithful adaptation that you're looking for, but there is an ever so slight possibility that it will grow to be something acceptable on its own terms. Regardless, the Paramount wolves are at the door, and the only way we're going to get through this is if we stick together. And a few more subs in the harbour never hurt our chances. So if you'd be so kind.
You picked a hell of a day to join up.
But remember, I'm just a brainless lump who's going to check the perimeter one more time to make sure we're tied in. Hooroo, Skipper.